What if I told you that one of the most enduring myths in human history, a secret coveted by kings, crusaders, and even modern-day billionaires, has been fundamentally misunderstood for millennia? This isn't just about a legend. It's about a hidden truth that could completely transform your perception of reality and unlock a power you never knew you possessed. For centuries, humanity has sought the Holy Grail, a mystical cup, a chalice, a vessel said to hold divine power, to grant eternal life, or to reveal ultimate truth. From the Knights of Camelot to the Templars, from the secret societies of Europe to the darkest corners of the Third Reich, and even to the sprawling campuses of Silicon Valley, the quest for the Grail has driven countless individuals to madness, war, and unparalleled discovery. But what if the greatest treasure ever sought, the very essence of immortality and divine connection, was never a physical object? What if it wasn't a cup, a dish, or a stone, but a code, a vibrational blueprint, a divine frequency, a symbolic representation of the purest state of human consciousness? This isn't a theory. It's not just a metaphor. This code is real. It's hidden not in ancient ruins or forgotten tombs, but in plain sight, encoded within the very fabric of ancient teachings, and even perhaps within your own spiritual DNA. It's been obscured by literal interpretations, by materialistic pursuits, by the very minds that sought to grasp it physically. The true Grail, as we will explore, might be something far more profound, a lineage not of blood, but of light, a testament to an original divine blueprint, an indestructible essence that came long before established religions, long before recorded history, long before the stories we were told. It's the guardian of a secret capable of activating forgotten parts of your soul. And now, it's about to find you. But pay attention. This code doesn't reveal itself to just anyone. It only awakens in those who are ready to look beyond the obvious, to feel beyond the physical, and to listen to the whispers of an ancient truth. If this video showed up for you today, perhaps your time has come. So, stay with me until the end, because you're about to discover why this teaching was hidden for millennia, why so many sought it in vain, and what happens when this ultimate wisdom is finally activated within you. The truth that official history, and indeed popular culture, never told is that the Grail was never just a mythological goblet painted on medieval tapestries or whispered about in esoteric texts. What most people don't know is that even before it entered the popular imagination as a literal cup, the true essence of the Grail had already walked the earth as a principle of pure consciousness. Consider the legends. The Grail was said to catch the blood of Christ, to be brought to England by Joseph of Arimathea, to have incredible healing and life-giving powers. It was always associated with purity, with lineage, with a direct connection to the divine. But what if blood wasn't literal, but symbolic of essence? What if lineage referred not to physical descendants, but to a transmission of conscious purity? The legends state that the Grail was kept in a secret location, accessible only to the pure of heart. This isn't a geographical secret, it's a vibrational one. The pure of heart are those whose inner frequency is aligned with this divine essence. The Grail, in its deepest sense, represents the original blueprint of human divinity. It's the pure, uncorrupted consciousness that existed before the fall, before duality, before the veil of forgetfulness descended upon humanity. Ancient civilizations, far older than Egypt or Greece, spoke of a primordial wisdom, a language of light that directly imprinted universal truths onto the soul. They knew that everything in the universe vibrates, and that vibration is the primal language. Before speech, Before alphabets, before books, there was sound. And before sound, there was pure thought, pure intention. And it's this pure state of intention, this divine blueprint, that the true Grail embodies. Imagine a world where knowledge of the universe, the soul, and the manipulation of the laws of nature was as natural as our use of electricity today. This was the wisdom that truly informed the concept of the Grail. It wasn't about finding an object, it was about recovering a state of being where humanity was fully integrated with its divine source, capable of creation, healing, and experiencing immortality not as an escape from death, but as an inherent quality of consciousness. When this primordial wisdom began to collapse, not due to external enemies, but due to its own spiritual arrogance and misunderstanding, the essence of this knowledge had to be preserved. So, it was condensed into symbols, into stories, into subtle codes, not to be buried or lost, but to be planted like seeds, left to bloom only when the soil, humanity's collective consciousness, was fertile enough to receive it. And that's how this legacy came to permeate various traditions, including the Christian esoteric lineage where it surfaced as the Holy Grail. It didn't teach with ordinary words. It taught with symbols, with geometry, with frequency, because it knew that true knowledge can't be memorized. It has to be experienced. And the symbols associated with the Grail contain a technology that works directly on the soul. All it takes is to look, feel, contemplate, and something awakens, something opens. And that something might be exactly what is moving inside you now. But to understand how this wisdom was encoded into human consciousness, you need to know the nature of the Grail itself. Because it's not just ancient, it's impossible from a material perspective. What makes it impossible isn't just the fact that its truth has remained intact after millennia. What defies all known laws is the way its essence functions. The Grail, as a divine blueprint, wasn't written with pen and ink, nor carved in stone like common inscriptions. It was formed from a material that doesn't belong to this physical world as we know it, an alchemical compound, living, impervious to corrosion, time, and human manipulation. That's why no empire could destroy it. No war, no library burning, no religious decree could erase this truth, because it isn't words in a book. Each symbolic representation, each legend, each subtle hint regarding the Grail is more than a story. It's a frequency, a geometric form embedded with consciousness. What's recorded there isn't read, it's absorbed. It's as if the symbols bypass the rational mind and go straight to the core of the soul, activating memories that have been dormant since before your birth. Because the language used there isn't meant to be mentally understood. It's vibrational. It's the language of the source itself. When you truly connect with the idea of the Grail, even without knowing its legends, something starts to move inside you. A different kind of silence, a subtle impulse that makes you remember something you've never read anywhere, but that seems to belong to you. This happens because the Grail's essence doesn't depend on logical understanding. It resonates directly with the energy field of the one who contemplates it. And if your soul is ready, that resonance opens doors, not outside, but inside. That's why so many have tried to study the Holy Grail as if it were a decodable text, trying to translate its meanings letter by letter, like any other foreign language. But those who try to access its power only with the mind fail. They close themselves off, because these inscriptions weren't made to be interpreted. They were made to be felt. They are living codes, activators of what's latent within you. And maybe that's why over the centuries the true versions of the Grail's teachings were hidden. Because someone realized that anyone who truly connected with that message with the eyes of the soul could awaken something that can't be controlled: inner sovereignty, vibrational autonomy, true freedom. But to feel this calling, you have to be silent. And in that silence, there's an even deeper secret. Because whoever created the symbols of the Grail knew that the sound behind them is the key that awakens the code. But before the sound, there was something even deeper. Absolute silence. A pure state of non-existence. And that's exactly where the true Grail invites us to return, to an origin that's not recorded in any history book, nor can be observed by any telescope, the origin of time, space, of reality itself. According to esoteric traditions, in the beginning, there was only the void, a complete nothingness without form, without movement, without even a concept of time. It wasn't darkness, because darkness is still something. It was pure non-existence, an absence so full that even the concept of absence didn't exist, a void that didn't know it was a void because there was no consciousness yet to observe it. And it was from that indescribable state that the first movement arose. But this movement didn't come from outside. It wasn't created by an explosion or by some external force. It was born from a single point, a thought. But not just any thought, like the ones that come and go in the human mind. What emerged there was a purposeful thought, a pure intention, without words, without language, just direction. A conscious impulse that came from nothing and, by emerging, became everything. And it's this thought that began the universe, because by moving it created vibration. And from vibration, everything we know today as reality began to take shape. This is one of the deepest secrets of creation. The universe wasn't born from matter. It was born from consciousness. Matter came later. First was vibration, and that vibration is still the foundation of everything today. That's why everything vibrates. That's why you feel. That's why your presence changes the environment. That's why words have weight. Because everything is, at its core, a dance of frequencies that come from thoughts at different levels of density. The concept of the Grail wasn't just describing the birth of the cosmos. It was showing the hidden blueprint of creation, a model that repeats all the time, not just on cosmic scales, but also inside you. Because that same pattern happens when an idea arises from your inner silence, when a true desire rises from the emptiness of your soul, when something inside you decides to move, even if everything around you is still. That is the structure of manifestation. First the void, then the thought, then the vibration, and only then the form. That's why everything you live, everything you experience, everything you touch began at some level with a thought. And if you know how to access that space before form, you don't need to react to reality. You can shape it, but to access that point of origin, you have to learn to step out of the rational mind. Because the ordinary mind only deals with what has already been created. It analyzes, compares, labels. But the purposeful thought that creates comes from somewhere else. It's not a reaction. It's a vibrational choice. And whoever masters that point of origin can move worlds with a simple intention. Now, let's look at the seekers of the Grail throughout history. The Knights Templar, for example, were often associated with the Grail not just for its sacred properties, but for its rumored power. They sought a material advantage, a hidden technology, or divine protection in battle. They saw it as an external force to be wielded. They sought the below, hoping to control the above. But their eventual downfall suggests they misunderstood the Grail's true nature. They were trying to change the reflection in the mirror without touching their own face. The Nazis, in their twisted and dark quest for racial purity and ultimate power, sent expeditions across the globe searching for the Grail. They believed it to be a physical artifact that would grant them dominion, a pure bloodline, that would validate their abhorrent ideology. Their search was the ultimate externalization of a spiritual concept. They sought to manipulate matter, to control form, without ever mastering frequency. They sought the dense, believing it would grant them the subtle. And their catastrophic end is a brutal testament to the consequences of such a profound misunderstanding. Today, we see a new breed of Grail seekers. Silicon Valley billionaires investing vast sums into life extension technologies, transhumanism, and artificial intelligence. They seek to upload consciousness, to genetically engineer longevity, to overcome death through technological means. They are trying to achieve immortality by manipulating the body, the brain, the external environment. They are trying to change the below without ever touching the above. They are trying to fix the effects without understanding the causes. They are trying to control matter without mastering frequency. But the Grail reveals that this primordial vibration is still present in everything, even now. It's not in the past. It pulses silently in every existing thing. And those who learn to hear it can recognize the sound of creation still vibrating in the now. But there's a silent obstacle between you and that hearing. A filter, a veil that distorts, muffles, binds. That veil is the body itself. Not the body as a divine instrument, but the body when it takes control. When the soul is forgotten and matter becomes the center of existence. The Grail's teachings speak of this with brutal clarity. The body is a temporary illusion, a tool, yes, but not the end goal. The problem begins when that tool starts to rule the spirit. When appetite screams louder than intuition, when impulse speaks louder than wisdom, when the senses become more important than presence. At that point, the soul is already chained. And that prison is tricky because it's comfortable. It disguises itself as pleasure, as achievement, as progress. Society celebrates the body, feeds its desires, profits from its impulses. And in the meantime, the spirit fades, suffocated by layer upon layer of identification with form. The insatiable hunger isn't just for food. It's for attention, for validation, for constant distraction, an unending need to fill a void that will never be filled with what's external. Compulsive speech is also a symptom. Words thrown into the wind, non-stop noise, empty conversations, all of it feeds the ego, which hates silence. Because in silence, the ego doesn't survive. That's why liberation starts right there. When you go quiet, when you stop, when you observe without reacting, it's in silence that the soul reappears, not as something to be achieved, but as something that was always there, waiting for you to come back inside. The Grail's wisdom doesn't ask for forceful renunciation, nor does it preach denial of the body. What it reveals is more subtle and more powerful. As long as you identify with matter, you'll be ruled by it. But when you remember that you are a soul inhabiting a body, and not the other way around, that's when true liberation begins. This liberation doesn't happen through shouting or flashy rituals. It starts in everyday life. In the choice not to react in the moment, you notice a desire rising and simply watch it pass. When you feel anger and don't turn it into an automatic action. When you're about to speak and choose silence instead. It's in those moments that the body stops calling the shots and the soul begins to breathe. But there's a detail most people miss. The body itself isn't the enemy. In fact, it can be the greatest ally of consciousness, as long as you learn to use it as a temple. And that's exactly the next secret revealed by the true Grail. Because the body, once purified from the ego's domination, becomes more than just matter. It becomes a bridge. And it was with this understanding that the highest masters throughout history, the true Grail keepers, built their greatest works. Not tombs or monuments to glorify kings, but portals, transition instruments between dimensions, maps in stone, in art, in sacred texts that reflect the architecture of the invisible. And at the heart of this mystery is the concept of a hidden chamber, a mystical realm. The legends speak of it as the Grail Castle, or Amenti in other traditions. Centers of deep energy, parallel realities accessible only to those who have transcended the density of matter and reached subtler levels of consciousness. But don't be fooled. The true Grail Castle is not a physical place on a map. It's not a hidden chamber with golden walls and mythological guardians. The true Grail Castle is a vibrational state, a field of expanded consciousness where souls are confronted with their own essence. There is no judgment as we know it, no courtroom, no punishment. What happens in this inner sanctuary is more subtle, more revealing, and infinitely more challenging. The soul sees itself without filters, without masks, without the roles it played in the material world. In the pure light of truth, all illusions fall. And what remains is what was cultivated in silence. Intention, frequency, consciousness. The ancient wisdom knew that the soul's journey doesn't end with death. It transforms. And to facilitate that passage between worlds, it encoded symbols, sacred geometries, and activation points that mirror the structure of the human energy body, as if each sacred symbol, each story, each proportion were a note in a greater symphony, a melody capable of resonating with the soul's vibrational field and guiding it to the other side. But for that to happen, you must pass through the hardest portal, the mind. Because the Grail's true power doesn't reveal itself to those who carry fear, guilt, or attachment. It opens only to those who have already died in life, who have already been reborn in silence, who've already conquered themselves. That's why so many seek it, and so few find it, because the portals aren't hidden from humanity. They're just invisible to eyes that still see with the ego. These portals still exist, but you won't find them on tourist maps. They don't shine in artificial lights or announce themselves with obvious signs. They vibrate in sacred places, at specific frequencies, and also within you. The purified body, the silent mind, the awakened heart, these are the true maps that lead to the Grail's wisdom. And if that seems far away, maybe it's because the most important question is missing. What's really keeping you from crossing that portal? The answer might be hidden in one of the simplest and most misunderstood teachings of all esoteric traditions. As above, so below. As below, so above. But this isn't just a pretty phrase about balance or reflection. It's a key that unlocks perception to something much deeper. The living connection between everything that exists. This maxim doesn't describe similarity. It describes vibrational correspondence, energetic interdependence, mirrored causality between the inner universe and the outer universe. What happens in you doesn't stay in you. What you feel, think, believe, and focus on echoes. Imagine for a moment that your consciousness is an antenna, and everything you transmit comes back not as punishment, but as vibrational coherence. You feel scarcity, think of loss, project fear, and without realizing it, you tune the reality around you to reflect exactly that. Not because the world is cruel, but because it's precise. The universe responds exactly to what you're putting out. Because what is above, the invisible field of energy and intention, shapes what is below, the form, the event, the experience. The Grail's teaching wasn't offering a mystical hint. It was revealing the map of manifestation. Everything starts from the invisible. Nothing begins in matter. Reality is a mirror. And that mirror doesn't show what you want. It shows what you are. And that's why the real work isn't outside. It's inside. Because trying to change the outside without changing the inside is like trying to change your reflection in the mirror without touching your face. That truth is so powerful because it gives you responsibility and power at the same time. If what's above influences what's below, then your inner world has authority over the outer world. The vibration of your mind, the clarity of your heart, the presence of your spirit, all of that is creating, even when you don't notice. And maybe now it makes sense why so many people try to change their lives by force and still can't. Because they're trying to change the below without ever touching the above. They're trying to fix the effects without understanding the causes. They're trying to control matter without mastering frequency. But what if you started looking at your outer world as a direct reflection of your current energy? Not to blame yourself, but to understand yourself. What if every conflict, every repetition, every closed door was showing you exactly where your vibration needs to be aligned? That shift in perspective is where it all begins. And the good news is that this key is available to anyone, but it only turns in the right lock when you align with it in a real way. It's not enough to memorize the phrase. You have to live it. Feel its truth in your body. Test it. Try it. Adjust it until what's inside you starts to transform what's outside. And when that happens, something changes. Reality stops feeling random. You start to notice patterns, coincidences, synchronicities. Things begin to align effortlessly, like someone is responding to you. But it's not someone. It's the universe itself mirroring your vibration. But there's a detail few people notice. Because before any transformation happens in the external world, there's a first point that has to be accessed, a point of silent alchemy where the separation between spirit and matter disappears. And there's a key point in this transmutation, a point the Grail legends reveal clearly, but most never understood, because separating the subtle from the dense isn't just a pretty metaphor. It's an internal, deep, and often uncomfortable process. The Grail teachings don't beat around the bush. Separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross with great diligence. This isn't symbolic. It's practical, vibrational, absolutely real. And if you understood the law of the mirror, now you need to know. The reflection only changes when the internal substance changes first. And that change happens in the invisible laboratory of the soul. Separating the subtle from the dense is true spiritual alchemy. It's where mysticism meets deep psychology, where energy transforms into presence, and where you stop reacting to life and start shaping it. But that requires a radical act of courage. Looking inward without distraction, seeing where the weight is, where your energy is still stuck in old forms, undigested memories, traumas that created crusts over your original vibration, all the unexpressed anger, all the accumulated fear, all the distorted desire. All of that is vibrational density. And as long as you carry those layers, your field can't emit clearly. The Grail encoded this with precision. Earth, the densest element, represents the rigidity of form, fixed beliefs, automatic behaviors, identities you've worn for years without realizing. Fire, on the other hand, represents the power of consciousness that burns away what no longer serves. Separating the two isn't an external operation, but an intimate, slow, ongoing process. It's when you start to distinguish what is instinctive reaction And what is vibrational choice? And this is where diligence comes in. The invisible discipline of observing yourself every day in the details. How do you react when you're ignored? What do you feel when you're praised? How do you act when no one is watching? Every little gesture, every micro reaction, every silent choice is revealing which part of you you're vibrating with, the dense or the subtle. But what is the subtle, really? The subtle is the field of deep neutrality. It's when emotion no longer controls you. It's when you can feel without drowning, think without identifying, act without carrying the reactive mind of the past. The subtle is lightness with roots. It's firmness without rigidity. It's presence without tension. And to reach that place, you have to burn the old in the fire of consciousness. That doesn't happen by avoiding pain, but by walking through it with awakened eyes. Inner transmutation begins when you stop trying to control the world and start refining your own frequency. It's not about protecting yourself. It's about purifying. It's not about distancing from others. It's about coming closer to yourself with more truth. Because when you purify, your vibration rises. And when your vibration rises, everything around you is impacted. People change. Situations dissolve. Spaces that were once blocked open up. Not because you forced it, but because you became compatible with the new. This is the ascent of the alchemist. The soul rises from earth to sky. And in that sky, there are no clouds, but clearer, vaster, more lucid states of consciousness. It's the point where duality loses strength, where the ego no longer commands. And when you touch that place, something in you awakens. A different kind of silence, a knowing that can't be learned, a lightness that can't be faked. It's in that state that the soul gathers transformative power, the wisdom not found in books, the energy that doesn't come from outside, the inner gold that only reveals itself to those who had the courage to burn away the lead of the old identity. But here's the point many forget. It's not enough to rise, because if you rise, see everything, understand everything, touch the light, and don't come back down, it means nothing. True alchemy doesn't end in ascension. It's completed in the descent. When you bring the subtle back to matter, when you anchor presence in the body, in the gesture, in the words, in the action, when elevated consciousness starts to live through you, and that's when the world changes. Not because it changed on the outside, but because you returned with a new center, a new vibration, a new spiritual intelligence operating through you. You now walk through life as a mirror of what you saw above. Every word you say carries intention. Every step vibrates direction. Every silence heals. But there's still one piece missing in this cycle. Because once you've learned to rise and descend, to transform within and reflect without, there's one last portal left. A place where those who have completed this process truthfully are taken. And that's where the true Grail consciousness reveals a destiny few even dare to imagine. And that's when the world changes. Because a soul that descends with light begins to carry a field so refined that it leaves traces. And when that trace is sustained with integrity, it becomes something rare, almost extinct in today's world, immortal consciousness. This is the point where the Grail's deepest revelation surfaces. The very possibility of Christ consciousness, of a divine lineage, of the bloodline of awakened beings, is not about the return of a specific body, but about the reactivation of a state of consciousness that doesn't belong to time. The Grail wasn't about a specific man. It was about the living manifestation of a source consciousness condensed into human form. And what it's saying is that this same consciousness, the vibrational pattern of immortality, can inhabit any body at any time. As long as that body is aligned, as long as the vibration is ready. This is the true code of immortality. And it has nothing to do with denying death, nothing to do with trying to extend youth or preserve the physical body indefinitely. The code of immortality is simple in form, but complex in depth. It's staying intact while moving through the cycles of existence. It's retaining the soul's essential identity as it navigates bodies, times, realities, and dimensions. It's staying awake even after each veil. It's not forgetting who you are, even when everything around you changes. Immortal consciousness doesn't cling to forms. It uses them. It can enter and leave bodies like a musician switching instruments, but never losing the melody. It's the same presence pulsing behind every name, every life, every face you've ever been. And why does that matter? Because, according to the ancient teachings, as long as you're identified with what dies, you're subject to the cycle of fragmentation. You're born, you forget, you suffer, you search, and you die again, carrying only unresolved fragments of what could have been integrated. But when the soul awakens to its own original frequency, the one that vibrates in direct resonance with the source, it transcends not as an escape, but as embodiment. It doesn't flee from the world. It moves through it with clarity. Immortality is not a place you go to. It's a state you activate here, now, within your vibrational field. And why do so few understand this? Because humanity has been trained to think with a dual mind, to search outside for what can only be found inside. Most people imagine immortality as a prize after death, or something reserved for mythological, unreachable beings. They don't realize it starts being built in the small choices of presence, in how much you hold your truth, in how much you resist the urge to betray yourself just to fit in how much you vibrate in alignment with what you know, even if no one sees it. Immortal consciousness begins the moment you stop living through the versions the world expects and start living your essence without a filter. When you let go of labels, roles, functions, and memories, when you accept that you are a point of light in motion, carrying a vibrational mission that spans centuries, and that this mission isn't about big outer accomplishments, but about the vibration you hold even on the darkest days. That's why the Grail's return is metaphorical. Because flesh, in Hermeticism, is just a vehicle, a temporary vessel for light to anchor in the physical plane. The true return doesn't happen outside, it happens within. Every time a soul aligns with the field of the source, the essence of the Grail walks the earth again, not as a person, but as a frequency, a living intelligence that acts through whoever is ready. This is the lineage of the immortals. Beings who aren't bound by time because time doesn't define them. They move between dimensions like breathing. They enter and exit matter without forgetting who they are, because their point of origin stays intact. They don't carry the ego of one life. They carry the vibration of many. And when they arrive, you feel it. There's something different in their eyes, in their silence, in how they're present. They don't compete. They don't explain. They simply are. But the Grail traditions leave a hidden detail, a detail few see. But that's crucial for that consciousness to anchor in a body. The body must be purified. It must have been prepared like a temple. It must know how to hold the energy without collapsing, because the light of immortal consciousness burns everything that's false. And if the body is still loaded with dense patterns, unresolved desires, and instinctive impulses, it can't handle it. It rejects. It shorts out. That's why the true return starts with invisible work, the vibrational construction of a new inner body, a field capable of receiving and sustaining the presence without losing itself in it. And that's what sets apart the common seeker from the true initiate. The seeker reads, "The initiate lives." But before that presence can fully descend, something else still needs to happen. One last activation. Because the body doesn't just need to be purified, it needs to be tuned. It needs to vibrate with the language of the source. And that language is not made of words. It vibrates on another level. It's not spoken, it's felt. And that's why the Grail now brings us to one of the most radical teachings of all. Time is not moving. You are the one moving through it. That phrase, for someone still trapped in the linear perception of reality, sounds like an unsolvable riddle. But for those who have already activated vibrational consciousness within, it's a revelation that changes everything. Because time, according to the ancient wisdom, is not a straight line we walk along. It's a fixed structure, a multi-dimensional grid that already contains all events, all possibilities, all versions of your existence. Nothing is happening. Everything has already happened. Everything already exists. The only thing that moves is your consciousness. Imagine time as a vast temple with infinite halls, each one containing a moment, a version, a possible reality. When you're spiritually asleep, you walk through these halls without noticing. You think life is carrying you along, that events are coming to you. But when you wake up, you realize it's you who's switching rooms. It's your vibration that shifts your position within the temple of time. And the most impactful part, you don't need to travel physically to change your reality because you're already in all of them. What changes is your tuning point. When your frequency rises, you shift into a new set of experiences compatible with that new field. Not because the future changed, but because you accessed another path within the structure that already exists. Time doesn't flow, you flow through its folds. That's why, in true Hermeticism, time is just a reflection of consciousness. There is no yesterday or tomorrow in the source plane. There is only now, expanded in multiple directions. Every choice you make alters your vibrational position. Every thought you sustain redirects your internal path. And that's how you move. Not with your feet, with your frequency. And that explains why so many things in your life seem to repeat. Why certain patterns come back even when you try to change. Because what's repeating isn't life. It's the point where your consciousness is stuck. You keep vibrating in the same state. And that's why you keep accessing the same rooms within the time temple. The repetition stops when the frequency changes. And frequency only changes when perception changes. That's why it's pointless to try to run from the past, rewrite memories, or control the future with anxiety. That's just running inside a space that doesn't move. The way out isn't outside, it's inside. When you realign your vibration with truth, integrity, and presence, it's like a new door opens, and it's always been there. But you couldn't see it before, because your consciousness wasn't compatible yet. That's the foundation of every real quantum leap. It's not jumping from one place to another. It's jumping from one state of being to another. And that doesn't require effort. It requires clarity. Time doesn't resist consciousness. It only responds. And when you understand that, the desperation ends. Because you realize you're not stuck. You never were. The key was always vibrational. But there's an even deeper detail in this teaching. Because if it's your consciousness that travels, then it's possible to return. It's possible to access memories that don't belong to this life. It's possible to feel events that haven't happened yet. It's possible to step outside the linear timeline and experience time the way the great masters did, as a field. And for that, The Grail traditions point to one final teaching, an activation key that cuts through all planes, all incarnations, all veils. And that key vibrates in silence. Because only in silence can you hear the call of the soul. And when that call is heard, something very ancient awakens inside you. It's not a regular memory. It's a recognition, a feeling that can't be explained. It's like some forgotten part of you, asleep for lifetimes, rises slowly and says, "Now I remember where I'm going." And that where isn't a place in the world. It's a vibrational point of origin, an invisible home, a light that pulses beyond time. Because the soul is not a straight line, it's a star in motion, and all it wants is to return. The ancient texts say it clearly. The soul of man never stops. It doesn't rest. It doesn't get distracted. It doesn't settle. It keeps going. Even when the body gets tired, even when the mind gets lost, even when the world seems to fall apart, it keeps going. Because what moves the soul isn't desire or fear. It's an invisible magnetism pulling it back to the all. Every life, every incarnation, every pain is a curve in the spiral of that return. And the closer it gets, the harder it is to keep sleeping. The more unbearable the lie becomes, the heavier the artificial world feels. That's why you feel that emptiness. That's why sometimes life doesn't make sense. Even when everything seems right, it ain't right. Because your soul doesn't just want to survive. It wants to remember. It wants to go home. And going home, in this case, doesn't mean dying. It means waking up, reconnecting with your original frequency. That unique vibration that's yours alone. That vibrates in perfect harmony with the all. But how do you do that in practice? The first thing you need to understand is that the soul speaks through subtle sensations, intuitions, goosebumps, deep breaths, moments when time stops and everything inside you goes quiet. To align with it, you need to learn to listen. The most powerful and most neglected practice is conscious silence every day for 5 minutes. Just stop, close your eyes, place a hand on your heart, feel your breath, and repeat silently, "I'm going home." This simple act, done with presence, begins to reactivate the vibrational memory of your origin. The second practice is to release what weighs you down. Every grudge, guilt, comparison, envy, resentment, all of it is density, keeping you far from your true frequency. Start today with what the traditions call purification by intention. Choose an emotion that's been blocking you. Name it, feel it, and say out loud, "I choose to transmute this into light." You don't need to know how. The vibrational choice is what starts the process. Consciousness does the rest. The third practice is coherence. What you say needs to reflect what you feel. What you do needs to reflect what you believe. Every bit of incoherence throws the soul off course. But when you start aligning thought, emotion, and action, you become a field of pure frequency. And when your frequency is pure, the universe responds. Everything begins to move to bring you back. The fourth practice is simplicity. The soul doesn't vibrate in excess. It vibrates in the essential. Less stimulation, less opinion, less distraction. More presence, more nature, more truth. A simple walk in silence, feeling the wind on your face, can align your soul more than 10 hours of spiritual theory. The soul isn't convinced by words. It responds to the vibration of what's real. And finally, the fifth practice. Remember always that you were never separate. That's the biggest lie we've been told, that we're isolated, fragmented, that we have to chase something outside. But the soul, when it touches its original frequency, dissolves into the cosmic light and realizes, I was never far, I was never alone, I was the road itself, I was the light itself. That's the destiny of the awakened soul. It's not to escape the earth, it's to illuminate the earth with the light of the origin. It's to live here, like up there. It's to be human without forgetting you're a star. But for that, there's one condition. Because before dissolving into the light, the soul must recognize and pass through its deepest shadow. And it's there, in that invisible point between light and darkness, where the final secret lives. Because the soul can only return to the source after crossing its own abyss. And the Grail traditions knew this. That's why they left warnings, etched into the very fabric of our collective consciousness, with the precision of someone who had already seen what was coming. They spoke of a time when man would master the skies and the power of lightning, a time when a great war would begin. But it wouldn't be a regular war fought by armies with weapons. It would be something much deeper, more invisible, more dangerous, a vibrational war, a silent conflict between frequencies, between light and darkness. And now look around. We fly. We've conquered the skies. We control electricity, information, technology. We've entered the age of artificial intelligence, hyperconnection, genetic manipulation. But we've lost the most important connection, with spirit. The prophecy isn't about the future. It's already begun. We're at the threshold of that battle right now. But most people haven't realized it yet because it doesn't happen on the outside. It's happening within. In the invisible field of collective consciousness. This war shows up every time you choose the lie over the truth. When you get distracted by the superficial and forget the essential. When you let fear dictate your behavior, even though you know what your heart is saying. Every choice you make is a vibrational vote. You're helping the light or feeding the shadow. And the most challenging part, the shadow often shows up as something seductive. It talks about comfort, convenience, self-protection. But deep down, it pulls you away from yourself. The war isn't against others. The shadow you need to defeat is the one lodged within your emotional field. It whispers automatic thoughts to you. It traps you in repeated reactions. It feeds judgment, resentment, silent despair. And the more you fight it in the dark, the stronger it gets, because the shadow doesn't die by force. It dissolves with presence. And that's why the Grail's code is so necessary now. It left not only warnings, but instructions. It showed us the path of vibrational coherence. The only thing that can get you through this war and keep you whole is coherence between what you vibrate, what you think, what you feel, and what you do. It doesn't matter if the chaos outside gets worse. If you're vibrating with internal clarity, you become untouchable. But that coherence doesn't happen by accident. It needs to be cultivated practically. When you feel anger but choose not to react. When you're afraid but you breathe and align with a higher truth. When you see manipulation but refuse to give in to panic. That's how this war is won. Not by shouting louder, by vibrating higher. By becoming a field so stable, so centered, that no dense frequency can shake you. And the ancient wisdom knew not everyone would make it. It said many would be deceived, that distractions would grow, that the noise would multiply, that temples would fall, and spirituality would become a spectacle. But it also said those who knew how to listen, not with ears, but with the vibrational heart, would be guided, because true light doesn't make a scene. It doesn't impose, it simply emits, and whoever is in tune recognizes it. That's the most beautiful part of all this. You don't need to save the world or change anyone. You just need to stay firm in your true frequency. You only need to keep your field clean, your words conscious, your thoughts sharp, because every coherent soul strengthens the network of light. And when many vibrate together, darkness will have nowhere left to hide. The Grail also warned of something even deeper. One final turning point. A moment when every soul will have to choose. A portal that doesn't open through effort, but through resonance. And those who aren't in resonance simply won't see it. Because the most important portals don't open with force. They open with frequency. And to align your frequency, it takes more than intention. You have to enter the rhythm of the universe. The cosmos is ordered. That's not poetry. It's an energetic diagnosis of reality. Nothing, absolutely nothing, is out of place. Even chaos, even collapse, even what seems unfair, it's all part of a fabric of order that sustains existence. That order isn't control, it's harmony. And living in harmony with it is what turns chaos into wisdom. That's what the great traditions mean by living according to the laws. Not moral laws imposed from outside, but universal principles that govern everything that exists. Rhythm, polarity, vibration, correspondence. When you start recognizing these laws operating within your own life, suffering stops making sense. You stop resisting what's happening and start dancing with reality itself. Most people suffer because they believe life should be different than it is. They resist. They fight against the flow. They feel like victims of the natural rhythm of things. But suffering only comes when you try to control what was meant to flow. When you understand that even chaos obeys an order, you start cooperating with life instead of fighting it. And the greatest miracle is this. When you resonate with that order, everything around you begins to adjust. Not because you forced it, but because you became an active part of the symphony. And the most surprising thing of all is that this code is replicating. If you made it this far, it's because some part of you recognized the calling. So tell me in the comments. I felt the Grail awaken in me. I want to see who else is ready to activate this wisdom hidden for millennia. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.